those of you sitting on this side in this wing, I want to quote to you the words of Jesus in the Upper Room Discourse. I will go away, but in a little while you will see me again. Okay, so don't worry, but I am going to disappear. When I was in university, I would go down the hill from where my university was located, and I'd cross over some railroad tracks and come to a small church named St. James's AME Zion. And at St. James's AME Zion, they had very kindly employed me, without pay, mind you, just as a volunteer, as the piano player for the junior choir, which was defined as everyone under the age of 55, I think, in that congregation. And on a Sunday morning at St. James's AME Zion Church, often you'd walk in and someone would sit down at the piano and someone would start singing. And often this is the song that we'd be singing, and I thought it would be good for us to sing it together today. So listen, here's how it goes. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Now what I'd like to do is learn that one line at a time, and we will be assisted in this if you will stand. So stand up. Here's how it goes. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Now, the clapping is wonderful, but that's Gospel 201. We're going to start at 101 here. I'm just sensing we may need a little bit of remedial instruction just to get us up to speed. So let's just sing that first line together. Ready? Over my head, I hear music in the air. Not bad. What I need from you, I need two things. Those two words, over my head and music in the air, I need you to hold them rather than just letting them fade out. Over my head, it needs to be held, and actually a little bit of crescendo wouldn't hurt. So, over my head, I hear music in the air. Yes, and now, if we can take music in the air and take each of those syllables and make them more distinct, what I have found when I am among those of my own pigmentation is that we tend to sort of slide through things in this very friendly, nice way, but we need more definition to those syllables. So let's try that first line again. Over my head, music in the air. That's better. Next line. Over my head. Yes. I hear music in the air. Third line. Over my head. I hear music in the air. So on this third line, we hold that note air, and we go up a whole step. And then there must be a God somewhere. So a couple tricks to this. It looks so simple when it's just on the screen, but it's actually more complicated. There must is just up one step, and it's there must. Let me just hear that. 1, 2, 3. There must, and then a long pause, be a God. And this word God is the punchline of the whole song. What's the form of this song, after all, right? It's what we call AAAB. And an AAAB song gives you kind of the setup, the opening thought, but doesn't finish it and repeats it 3 times to sort of stretch out and increase the sense of tension in the song. So this is, done in the blues, right? My baby done left me, and all I've got is this old Ford, or whatever, And then you repeat that 3 times. My baby done left me, and all I've got is this. And then only at the end, is the punchline. If I had bought a Chevy, I would be right with the Lord, or whatever. So AAAB stretches out this thing, but you don't find out the meaning of it until the 4th line. And in the 4th line comes the meaning. And the meaning of this music in the air is, going back to our sacred music, there must be a God somewhere. So stretch out that God. And then when we get to the word somewhere, it's suspended for a moment, because this song is all about tension and suspension. And so, there must be a God somewhere. Let's try that. There must be a God. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head. Over my head. I hear music in the air. Over my head. Music in the air, over my head. I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. All right, over my head I hear clapping. So on 2 and 4, I hear clapping in the air. Singing over my head. I hear singing in the air. I hear singing in the air. Over my head. Over my head. Singing in the air. Over my head. Because there must angels in the air. I hear angels in the air. Angels in the air. Over my head. I hear angels in the air. Over my head. And the saying, there must be a God somewhere. There must be a God. There must be a God somewhere. There must be a God. There must be a God somewhere. Amen. Amen. Where does that song come from? We don't know. It doesn't have an author. It emerges out of the oral tradition. But we can imagine, right, where that song was first sung. Probably outdoors, probably in a field, probably under a hot sun, where a people who have been torn from their own homes, torn from their own family, are working for another, receiving no benefit from their labor, owned, exploited, used, bought and sold. And it's out of that condition that someone begins to sing. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Isn't it extraordinary that that's what they thought to sing at that moment, in that condition of oppression? I had a friend who heard me sing that song once, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "Andy, I don't like that song." He said, "That's a very liberal song." I said, "What in the world are you talking about?" He said, "There must be a God somewhere. It's so vague." I said, "You have totally missed what this song is about. Didn't you notice the long pause in this song? There must, in this long pause, be a God somewhere." What is that long pause? It is a declaration of faith. That word must is not, I suppose maybe somewhere there might be. It's this declaration. In spite of everything I see around me, in spite of the conditions of the life that I and everyone I love are in, I sense that someone made this world, has instilled it with heavenly harmony, and I am part of that story too. I'm not just part of this story of oppression. There must be a God somewhere. Yesterday, if you were in the gym with us, we talked about the good news, the incredibly good news that frames the Bible. The good news about creation, that the world is good, and that when God's image bearers arrive in the world, it's very good. And when these image bearers start tending and keeping the world, they bring forth, they elicit the flourishing of the world. And then we looked at the other end of the story where God takes everything that's been done in fulfillment of the command to be image bearers and rescues and redeems and remakes it all and gives it to his redeemed people as a gift, a city coming down out of heaven from God to earth, where God's image bearers live eternally in the glory that always was intended for the world, from good to very good to glory. That's the bookends of the story. That's the beginning and the end of the story that makes sense of everything that we do in our lives and give us hope for where it comes from and where it's going. But for a few moments, we need to dwell on the middle of the book. What went wrong in this story of image bearing? And the Bible has two answers to that question. The image bearers, who were meant to themselves represent God in the world, instead, in the third chapter of the book, begin to make substitute images. They do not fulfill their calling to themselves bear the image of God. Instead, they turn to things in God's own creation and invest them with the hope that those things will bear the image of God, rather than they themselves. They turn to created things as a substitute for the Creator. And the biblical word for this is idolatry. And idolatry is about the substitution of images. God wanted the world full of images of God. And this room is full of image bearers, images of God. But the image bearers, when they depart, when they declare independence from God, make substitute images. And those substitute images misrepresent the true God in fundamental ways. Every idol makes two promises. You shall not surely die, and you shall be like God. Every idol holds out those promises that the serpent holds out with the fruit in the garden. You shall not surely die. The conditions of a creature will not apply to you. And you will be like God. You will ascend out of your mere creaturely status into something bigger and better. And every idol is a good thing that the image bearers turn to make them great. You shall be like God. You shall not surely die. And every idol disappoints. So a couple examples. We talked yesterday about how you take the grape is good, you culture it, get wine is very good. Wine is a very good thing. Alcohol is a part of God's creation that only tastes good when image bearers tend to it. But of course, this very good thing can become an idol, right? And how does it work? Well, suppose you're a first-year student at a university not named Biola. What is it to be a human being when you come into a situation where you don't know many other human beings? It's a vulnerable feeling, right? Suppose you walk into a party and you don't know anyone there. Most people feel a little unsettled. What if I told you there was some created thing that if you would drink it, would remove that sense of vulnerability? You shall not surely die. You'll cease to feel that sense of unsureness about yourself. And if you drank enough of this, it would more and more elevate you out of your mere creaturely way you are and give you this sense of kind of being awesome. Funnier than you actually are. A better dancer than you actually are. It would make the other people around you seem more interesting and engaged with you. And the interesting thing about idols is that they all work at first. At first, the idol actually delivers what it promises. Those first few drinks actually do remove that sense of vulnerability and actually do give you this sense that you're kind of free in a way you haven't been free before. The problem with idols is they don't keep working. Or more precisely, every idol which starts out promising amazing things, you shall not surely die, you'll be like God, and seeming to demand very little, just take a little sip of this. Take one drink, two drinks. Gradually begins to ask more and more of you. Takes a few more drinks to get the same effect, a few stronger drinks to get the same effect, and delivers less and less. So that every idol which starts out promising a lot and demanding very little, over time ends up delivering almost nothing and demanding everything. Because if you use alcohol in this way as an idol, it will eventually take over your life. It will demand everything from you. And it will deliver nothing of what it initially promised. And we know this if we have walked with friends or loved ones through the depths of addiction, is that in the depths of addiction, rather than being elevated to the God-likeness and freedom that we sought, you are actually enchained to this thing that does not love you, does not care about you, and actually wants to demand everything from you. And any good thing can be an idol. Working out is great. I did 100 burpees the other day because I had gone to In-N-Out, and I figured that was about an equal exchange. Actually, I don't think that's true. I think it's like 2,000 burpees for one cheeseburger. But anyway, it's absolutely wonderful to tend to our bodies and so forth. But if you use fitness and you invest in it the hopes that I will not surely die, and I'll be like God, it actually ends up taking over your life. One of the most celebrated image bearers of our time was a man named Steve Jobs. Oh, by the way, here's what he chose as the logo for his company. Isn't it interesting? It's the bitten fruit. It's the thing that was supposed to make you like God and not surely die. And in the early days of Apple, they put a rainbow on it as if to say, hey, everything worked out great. Like we worshiped the apple and it worked for us. And version 2.0 is even better. And Steve Jobs is celebrated in our culture, I think, because he was an image bearer. He really was an image bearer. He'd created good things, very good things. In fact, sometimes we use a kind of iconography of Steve Jobs, as if he now is the kind of person we want to become, represented in the way that we used to represent Christ himself. But Steve Jobs had an idol, and it wasn't technology, strangely enough. Steve Jobs actually had a very healthy relationship with technology. Now, all of us who use his devices look at them and say, I will be like God with this. But Steve Jobs actually seems to have had a very healthy relationship with technology. He had another idol, and his idol was food. When he was a teenager, Steve Jobs went to an apple farm in Washington State, and for 2 weeks, he ate only apples. I am not making this up. This is in Walter Isaacson's biography. And that was the beginning of a lifelong obsession in Steve's life with raw diets that allowed him to gain a sense of control over his life. And Walter Isaacson very baldly calls this an eating disorder. Steve Jobs lived his whole life with an eating disorder. He would storm out of restaurants when the food wasn't prepared in the way he wanted. It would disrupt his meals with his family. He was very picky, and it was all about control. You shall not surely die. You shall be like God. And when Steve Jobs early on embraced these raw diets, they made him feel elevated, godlike, beyond his own capacities. In 2003, in a fairly routine exam, doctors found cancer in Steve Jobs' pancreas. And pancreatic cancer is a death sentence within months in 95% of the cases. But when the doctors came in to give Jobs the diagnosis from the biopsy, there were tears of joy in their eyes. And they said, you have islet cell pancreatic cancer. And that is the one kind of pancreatic cancer that is highly curable. We'll just do a procedure called the modified Whipple procedure. We'll take out the portion of your pancreas that's cancerous. It almost certainly hasn't spread. You can live a full, healthy life. Steve Jobs walked out of the examining room. This is all in the official biography. And for 9 months, against the pleas of his family and friends, tried to treat his cancer with ever more elaborate and exotic diets. He tried to use food to cure it. And 9 months later, when he finally gave in and had the surgical procedure, the cancer had already spread to his other organs. And 8 years later, he was gone. The idol that at the beginning of his life promised control, promised godlikeness, at very little cost, ended up demanding his life, because that's what idols always eventually want from you, your life. God hates this. He hates that the world is full of misrepresentations of himself. But there's another thing that God said to hate. Not just idolatry, but also injustice. And how are these two things related? Why is it that the prophets constantly say these are the two things God hates? God hates idolatry, and God hates injustice. Does God just hate those two things the way that I hate licorice and Brussels sprouts? I happen to not like either of those things, but my hatred for those two things is unrelated. And a few years ago I realized, no, God actually hates idolatry and injustice for the same reason. And I realized this when I met a man named Jai Kumar Christian. Jai Kumar is the head of World Vision in India, in the nation of India. And I spent a day with Jai Kumar visiting. I want to show you a picture of the kids that we visited. Visiting children who just a few years before our visit had been slaves. They had been in what India calls bonded labor, but it's really just modern-day slavery. And as we know, there are 21 million slaves in the world today. And we met a couple of these these boys and these girls. And the way that bonded labor works in India is that if a poor family needs money, they go to a local moneylender, and he says, sure, I'll give you a loan. He doesn't tend to mention that the interest rate will be in the 50 to 60% per year range. He gives them a loan, and they never can pay it back because they're very poor. And one day, the moneylender's henchmen come, and they say, well, you have not been able to pay back this loan, but there's that 8-year-old back in the back of the house, and she's not really doing anything. She could come work for the moneylender and pay off the debt. And so the family, being desperate, lets the child go. But once the child is in the grip of the moneylender, what the moneylender doesn't tell the family is that he'll now add the room and board charges for the child to their debt, so that the debt will actually increase. They'll never pay off the debt, and that child is now available to be exploited, rolling cigarettes, making bricks, beating big stones into small stones to make gravel, dirty, dangerous, difficult work, not allowed to go to school, and used in all sorts of other ways at the whim of the moneylender. And Jaikumar said something to me on the way to this district where children had been exploited in this way. He said, Andy, when you see injustice in the world, it's a sign that someone has played God in the life of someone else. And as I reflected on that, I realized, of course, that's what the moneylender does. The poor family has a need. The moneylender says, I can meet that need, very low cost. But over time, the demands ratchet up more and more, and eventually the loan is gone, the money is gone, but now the moneylender has taken the most precious thing in this family's life, their child, exploiting them. And I realized that's just the same thing as idolatry. Instead of making a false god, someone's playing a false god. And so the reason God hates idolatry and injustice is because they're the same thing. Injustice and idolatry are the substitution of false images in the world for the true image. And what happens in that village? Who's like God in that village? Well, the moneylender's like God. Are the poor like God in that village? They would say, no, we're nothing like God. We can't even provide for our own families. And God looks at this and sees this exaggerated, misplaced image in the moneylender and the defaced, erased image of God in the poor, and hates injustice the way he hates idolatry. Now, World Vision had been working in this village for 10 years, and I talked with one of these girls. She'd been released from this. And I want to tell you one last story and then send you out. I asked her, she was no longer a slave, she was back in school, so I said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I want to be a doctor. And I said, well, that's great. What do you do after school for fun? And she said, oh, after school we free slaves. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, there are still some kids in our district who are in bonded labor, so we go to them after school and we say, you do not have to stay here. You can come with us to school tomorrow. And then we go to the moneylender and we tell him, what you're doing is illegal. And she actually wagged her finger. You could be thrown in jail. Stop this. This was a girl who a few years prior had been a slave. And I realized I just met my first 12-year-old abolitionist. What is God doing in the world? God is restoring the image in the world. That girl who had the image of God erased in her life was now an image bearer again. God does not leave us in our idolatry and injustice. He restores the image. And that's what happened in those fields when that song was sung, when the gospel was proclaimed in that situation of injustice. Out of that came that song. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.